So good afternoon. If you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. We're fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Nicola Sturgeon, she's at it again. Instead of focusing on the dire straits that Scotland and indeed the entire United Kingdom find ourselves in, she's, you guessed it, still banging on about independence. She's complaining that Liz Truss has not apparently called her since becoming Prime Minister. She said the snub was absurd and unprecedented. But whilst I do agree Liz should call, I can imagine it would be a pretty dull conversation, timing just how long it takes one-trick pony Sturgeon to put in a badly disguised dig about independence. No thanks, I think I'd avoid that one as well. I mean, what's the point? You know what she's going to say. My mum just can't stand her. Nicola Sturgeon, she makes my blood boil. Can't she talk about something else? I just can't stand that woman, God forgive me. Scotland's First Minister complained that both Boris and Theresa May got in touch with her shortly after becoming Prime Minister for all the good it did them. Look at her brushing off Boris's attempt at chivalry. Nicola has said that it's not the right way to do government in a grown-up way. Pot, kettle. Apparently, Liz hasn't phoned overzealous mask mandate Mark Drakeford either. He's in a bit of hock after he claimed the case was closed for COVID and that the world has moved on, he wishes. Nicola has yet to answer simple questions on independence, like what money will Scotland use? I mean, you can't keep sterling. The interest rate is governed by the Bank of England, and that makes no sense. And if you can't answer simple questions like that, how can you expect the Scottish people to go along with your plan? She said that the pound was as much Scotland's currency as it was the currency of the rest of the United Kingdom. And despite warnings by experts that she would have to drop it immediately after independence and that the currency that was not linked to sterling would be needed to pay Scotland's multi-billion-pound balance deficit, Nicola Sturgeon is pressing ahead at the taxpayers' expense with Part 3 of her currency plan. There was even the suggestion that English taxpayers would continue to pay for Scottish pensions, which is laughable. And the SNP are now running scared of the Labour Party. Their deputy leader, Keith Brown, in their conference, which starts today, is apparently going to call Sir Keir Starmer another Tony Blair. Oh, that's a bit of a stretch. And if she fails in her latest call for independence, which is, it is suggested that she will, she's unveiled a widely derided plan to use the next general election as a de facto referendum that she would need over 50% to win. You can't blame her for focusing on independence, though, can you? I mean, the level of poverty in the east of Glasgow is apparently one of the worst in Europe. The attainment gap between rich and poor children is as wide as ever, and Scotland's still the drug death capital of Europe. Yes, I'd probably give all that a swerve as well. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. In the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are we turning into a nanny state? Prime Minister Liz Truss blocked a £15 million advertising campaign that would encourage households to save energy on ideological grounds. She believes that telling people how to live their lives would turn the country into a nanny state. This is a country... what do you think? Do you think this country is heading in that direction? At 4:50, it's time for my royal roundup, and there's always something going on in the royal household. Commentator Richard Fitzwilliams will be live in the studio. On the agenda, the anticipated Netflix documentary about the Sussexes that is promised to pull no punches. And then at 5, it's difficult conversations. Universities are being told to let loved ones know if students are suffering from mental health problems in a bid to prevent youngsters from taking their own lives. A father who knows all about that is Stuart Falconer. He tragically lost his 15-year-old son to suicide and has set up a foundation to help others grieving. He'll be with me in the studio in the next hour. That's all on the way. Tell me, as ever, what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome my wonderful panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also GB News presenter, Father Calvin Robinson. Oh, what do you prefer, Calvin, father or reverend? You said either or.
In my tradition, we usually say father, but most Anglicans say reverend, so I don't really mind what people find comfortable.
Reverend sounds more sort of revered. Reverend, more, you know what I mean? It sounds.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, I'll go with reverend for a bit, and then maybe I'll shimmy Michelle. Father Cow. Father Cow.
Reverend Robinson has alliteration.
Reverend Robinson. Oh, Reverend Rob. Okay. Oh, I like that.
Can we say congratulations to Leo Kearse because he has a baby girl now?
Oh, congratulations! I knew it would be a girl.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. Isn't it? Lovely,
Good
lovely.
news. That's what we like.
That's lovely, isn't it? They're cute. Oh, he's a father. You think you were worried when it was there. You wait, the worry just goes 1,000 times. You don't know what's hit you.
Really what?
No. Anyway, so what do you think then? So Nicola Sturgeon, I'll start with you, Calvin. Nicola Sturgeon, she's obviously going on about independence. She literally will not let it go. No. She's going to try and use it. Obviously, she thinks she's going to fail this next attempt, then try and use the next election as a de facto referendum. I mean,
yeah.
It feels like there's no end to this woman stopping this thing.
She seems bitter and resentful. She doesn't seem to like England, yet she always wants England's attention. She's like, please give me attention, give me more attention. She could phone Liz Truss if she wants to speak to Liz Truss. It doesn't have to be the other way around. In fact, when someone new gets into office, it's usually other world leaders that call them to congratulate them. So there would nothing stopping her. As for Liz Truss, I do think she should be reaching out to the horrible Mark Drakeford and Nicola Sturgeon because we do need to strengthen the union. As much as these people are divisive, intolerant and anti-English, we do need to keep them on side.
In your view, they probably, I don't know whether they would disagree. Maybe they wouldn't disagree with you, I don't know. But I'm trying to be generous.
So I tell you who Nicola reminds me of?
Oh, no.
Meghan Markle.
Do you think?
Whinging and moaning. Oh, she hasn't called me, it's all about me. No, she hasn't called me. Saying, oh, Theresa May called me within a month. Boris called me within 2 weeks. Who cares? Liz Truss is her own person. And why does, as you say, Jimmy Cranky, you pick up the phone and call her? I'm sorry. I've just had enough of this woman. I think she does everything for a reaction. And I actually think she's reckless, irresponsible, and at times quite dangerous. And she's an attention seeker. Liz Truss was completely right.
Although I do think, obviously Liz Truss should speak to her, but then at the same token, as you said, you haven't called me, I haven't called you, and then she's saying deal with it in a grown-up way. Well, then pick up the phone and call Liz Truss if that is the case.
And look, Liz Truss has a bit on her shoulders.
She's got a lot to do.
Economic crisis, there's a war in Ukraine, high cost of living, we could go on after the mini-budget. Is she really there thinking, going, I wonder how lovely Nicola is? She's got all these big problems, so give her a break. It's not all about you.
I think we should get rid of these devolved nations and just have one United Kingdom government.
Well, wasn't that Tony Blair's plan? I mean, he set this thing up, this
he made things worse. I think we should undo all of the work he did.
Interesting, though, that they're sort of saying now, they're getting worried now about Labour, because the reason why the SNP have such a big stronghold is because Labour is so weak, because Labour used to have a very strong hold in Scotland, and then, of course, they lost all of that, especially with Jeremy Corbyn sort of taking the reins of Labour. Nobody wanted to vote for him, and in Scotland in particular, they weren't going to do that. In fact, nobody would. So it's really difficult for Labour to sort of gain ground, but it feels like the SNP are now worried that the Labour Party will gain ground because they're talking about Keir Starmer as though he's a threat.
Yeah, I don't think he is a threat. I only think he's winning in England because people are voting or saying they're going to vote against the Tories. I think the Tories are losing the next election. It's not that Labour are particularly winning it. The Labour Party don't have anyone charismatic. They don't have any strong policies. They have no reason to vote for them other than voting against the Tories. So the Tories have got 2 years to try and win back 30 points, which is very, very difficult.
It's not a lot of time, though, is it? But I think people are more supporting Labour, but they're not supporting Keir Starmer.
No.
And comparing him to Tony Blair. I'm sorry, there is no comparison. He might be trying to use his quotes, but, Keir Starmer's charisma bypass, he hasn't got one. He can't buy one. He just, it's not there. And I don't think people trust him either.
No, I don't really have any faith in his leadership. I mean, because I haven't forgotten Beergate. I've not forgotten the light sort of touch that the rest of the media gave Keir Starmer on that, and the fact that it wasn't going to be re-investigated, and it was just the pressure that then, meant that it was investigated. So for me personally, I think, well, I don't know what that's about, but I don't like the look of it. I don't like that. Didn't feel right. Then there were all the lies with the Angela Rayner not being there when she was, and then it was not many people, and then it turned out there were. Then it wasn't organised, and then it was, and then everyone was saying what an honest person he is, and I'm thinking, well, to me, he's no less than honest than Boris in that respect, if I'm making a comparison. That's what I think. So
It's an interesting point. I think the mainstream media, or the rest of the media, really, really want Keir Starmer in government.
Yeah.
And they will do anything they can. They pushed Boris Johnson out. They're leaning very strongly against Liz Truss right now. They want him in. But I don't know why.
Well, he's got the answers for everything, but he's never been responsible for anything, has he? Do you see what I mean? And he lacks in personality and charisma, and it is important. And he just isn't a vote winner.
Well,
you need
we'll
Andy
see.
Burnham. I keep saying this.
Well, we'll see, because, you know, at the moment the Tories are sort of, setting themselves alight. I mean, they're on free fall. They're just snowballing out of control with their own MPs and backbenchers. It's just ridiculous. They don't seem to understand that in order to win, it's a bit like watching The Apprentice, isn't it? In order to win, you need to work as a team to make the team win, and then nobody goes home. But if you work against each other, then you won't win, and you'll all lose in the end. I don't understand why they can't see it. It's almost funny, actually.
I was at a Conservative Party conference this week, and it just felt like the death knells were ringing. It felt like everyone there appreciated that they were going to lose the next election, come what may. And it was all about a lack of discipline. MPs were saying exactly what they thought with no consideration of the party whip. You know, ministers were coming out against the Prime Minister. Everyone was just doing whatever they liked.
See, this is it where Gove, he should have the whip taken away from him. They have to get, they're all giving it on a plate to Keir Starmer. That's what they're doing with all this
It's a shame. It's a shame, because the country deserves a proper race when it comes to, who's going to run the country. But it's a bit like the Scottish, actually. They deserve a proper race as well, and they haven't got anybody else really to represent them other than Nicola Sturgeon, because the Tory party are in free fall. They can't represent anybody. The Labour Party are non-existent pretty much in Scotland. What is left?
But what is Labour? I mean, what does he stand for? He always sits on the fence. You know, he agrees with the strikes, does he? I got stuck in it today, but he won't let them go on the picket lines. He sits on the fence, doesn't even know what a woman is.
Well, do you know what they have said? He has said that it's not net zero. Is it zero carbon? Same thing, really. 2030 instead of 2050. So he's going to do it in. Just say they do get in. So just say 2025. The Conservatives will be wise to just drag this out till 2025. You might as well. I mean, that could be the last bite of it that you get for a while. But let's hope it isn't. But, whatever. 2025. He's got 5 years. If Keir Starmer does get in, he's got 5 years to turn this whole green thing around.
Where did you get this number from?
It's not true.
Where is he getting the money from? Where is he getting the money from?
Well, they're not answering those. Well, they don't answer the question because none of them actually answer these questions until they're actually in power. And they say they can't answer them because they're not in power, so they don't know the situation they'll inherit, which is handy, really. Anyway, if you just joined me, welcome. This is GBNews. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are we turning into a nanny state? Prime Minister Liz Truss blocked a £15 million advertising campaign that will encourage households to save energy. What do you think? Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Also, tell me what you think about the monologue, Nicola Sturgeon. It is, of course, the SNP's conference. It starts today. At GB News, tweet me now. There is a poll up, though, asking you with regards to that nanny state. Do you think that we're turning into one? Cast your vote now. But first, let's get some weather.
So looking ahead to this evening's weather then, and the UK looking mostly fine with clear, sunny spells. A few showers, though, in the northwest. Let's home in. It's going to be a dry start to the evening across the southwest of England. Fairly clear skies and no more than a gentle wind blowing. Then high pressure will be in charge of the weather across the southeast, keeping it dry and settled with long, clear periods developing. Some patchy cloud drifting in across Wales, but the weather's staying fine there, and some also clear spells at times. And a similar weather setup expected as we head across to the Midlands, and the day ending on a quiet note with a good deal of dry and at times reasonably clear weather all round. Away from the North Pennines, where we could see some cloud, the northeast of England heading into the evening on a fine note as well. A slight southwesterly breeze is expected, though. And that breeze fairly noticeable as we head north towards Scotland, although there will be clear spells in the east. Further west, more in the way of cloud, and showers expected there as well. Northern Ireland could catch a shower or two as well, but mainly towards the north and the west of the province and elsewhere. Although it will be a little breezy, the weather does look fine. So turning chilly across southern and eastern areas overnight under broken cloud. Meanwhile, winds strengthening in the northwest with rain arriving. And that's how the weather's shaping up this Sunday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
So good afternoon. It is just coming up to 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. So it is time for the Great British Debate, but of course you did get your keep your messages coming in, but with regard to Nicola Sturgeon and what we mentioned in the monologue. I love getting all your views, but now it is time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, are we turning into a nanny state? Prime Minister Liz Truss has blocked a £15 million campaign this winter, telling the UK how to save energy. Even thinking about telling people how to turn off their washing machines at certain hours has raised alarms. Why does the government feel that they need to sort of baby the general public? Remember the sugar tax, manufacturers replacing sugar with artificial sweeteners to avoid it. And then there was the infamous Hands Face Space campaign during the COVID pandemic. And then back in 2016, when the government spent £15 million, it's the magic 15, isn't it, on delivering leaflets to every household in the country, recommending people vote to remain during the referendum campaign. Do we really need to be handled like this by the government in this manner? Or do people need the advice amid the energy crisis? What do you think? Is Liz Truss right with this latest campaign? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are we turning into a nanny state? Well, I'm joined now by journalist and broadcaster Sam Dowler. Sam, welcome and thank you for joining me. So what do you think then, Sam? You've not got a Christmas tree behind you. Is that a Christmas tree behind you?
It's a Halloween tree.
I was going to say, it's not yet Christmas. I suppose we need to do Halloween first, isn't it? So Halloween tree. Sam, I've got to ask you then. So what do you think? Liz Truss is saying that we shouldn't really be spending £15 million telling people that you need to switch off your kettle and put your washing machine on at night. I mean, most people already know these things. What's your view?
Well, I think that £15 million is a drop in the ocean compared to what could be coming. I'm not a big fan of Jacob Rees-Mogg, but he'd already done a photo shoot and ad campaign. It's essentially it's advice to help people out, and Lord knows, we know what it's like to live in a nanny state because anything can happen. We've just been through a pandemic, but if it stops or at least prevents any kind of rolling blackouts, etc., it will save lives. People are going to die. People who are on ventilators, dialysis. This is a serious crisis. So £15 million is really nothing if it's going to save some lives and also give people the advice that they need. Because of course, we don't necessarily know about all the power how much or drain certain things in our households are. So I think why not? I mean, at the end of the day as well, you've got Liz Truss saying no to it this week. She'll probably say yes to it next week because she does love a U-turn.
Seem to be U-turning. I mean, but you know, if it's a bad idea, then I don't think it's a bad idea to change your mind. I'd call it that if you change your mind because something better's come along. But listen, you said 15 million quid isn't a lot of money. It is a lot of money, and there's lots of little bits of 15 million quid that add up to a lot of money that they're wasting on stuff like this, telling us things that we already know. They could actually put that money into potentially, you know, changing a load of people who've got the meters where you have to put money into a different type of meter. Or, do you know what I mean? They could put that money into something else. Instead of, you know, even the MPs could be telling their constituents, or, you know, Liz Truss, even if she spoke about it, she'd get a bigger audience than their campaign. So why are they doing this sort of thing?
Well, I mean, for starters, they don't seem like they are going to be doing it. But and the reason I say 15 million is not very much. I mean, look at the billions upon billions that they wasted during the pandemic. Like compared to all of that is hardly anything. This is an advertising campaign that, as I said, could save lives. I mean, this is obviously, you know, we have a government in disarray. We're careening from one crisis to the next, and you know, and the Conservatives are in free fall. I mean, this is, you know, these are real world problems. And if we literally have power cuts and blackouts at Christmas time in December, people are going to die. So we do need to make sure that, like, if there's anything we can do to help, then we must do it, because we simply don't know. Like, your average elderly person doesn't know what's going on with the power in their house. Like,
you want to bet my mother, she's 70-something, she's as sharp as a tack. She keeps her eye on that meter as it spins and watches which device is doing it. Most people, I think the government are really underestimating the intelligence of the British public. We do know. I mean, especially those in households where they're really watching the money. Those people are usually the most astute of all. Do you think that perhaps the government needs to be doing... I mean, you obviously think it's a good idea, but what about things like when they're telling us about blackouts and things? I mean, do you think that's a realistic thing? Do you think they're being honest with that? Do you think it's a bit scaremongery?
No, I don't think it is. I think, I mean, as I said before, like, since the pandemic, we know that literally anything can happen at any point. I mean, you know, we don't even know if we're on the verge of a nuclear war worldwide, World War III, for goodness sake. So I think, you know, an ad campaign to simply give people advice is, you know, it's a great idea. And as I'm not a big fan of Jacob Rees-Mogg, but I think he's on the money with this one. And I think, like, you know, it's gonna be, you know, some real problems for you know, the British public. I think it's essential. It's essential advice, and I think you know that we should get on board with it, really.
Well, I think, yeah, well, they're definitely on the money on something. £15 million is a lot of money. Sam Dowler, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. Right, he's a journalist and broadcaster. I'm also joined now by political commentator Reem Ibrahim. Reem, thank you for joining me. What do you think? Does the public need all this mollycoddling like this and spending £15 million? Sam doesn't seem to think it's a lot of money. I think it could go a long way to help households, but what do you think?
Thank you for having me on. And yeah, I mean, I understand where Sam is coming from, but I think it's incredibly patronising for us to sit here and say, you know, these elderly people don't know how to reduce energy. Of course they do. They've been around longer than I have. I'm sure they're more than capable of turning off their own radiators. I mean, this advice is really silly. You know, we do not need the government to tell us what we can and cannot do with our energy. We do not need the government to tell us how to use our energy, how to turn off the boilers, how to turn off radiators. I think the majority of the British public are clever enough to do that themselves.
Well, it does seem... I mean, I'd be inclined to agree with you, but then Sam seems to think that people need this. They need to know, because he said that people are going to die if they don't get this information. I mean, do you think that that's actually a good point?
No, absolutely not, because I think what we need to remember is this is the way that the price mechanism works, right? When we see high prices, we reduce consumption of a good. So whether that be, you know, we're buying too much beer on the weekend, if the prices of beer go up, then we buy less of it. That's how the price mechanism works. As energy is increasing and energy prices are increasing, we reduce the amount of energy that we consume. People are clever enough to do that themselves. They do not need a £15 million government campaign telling them to do it for them. I mean, we've seen this time and time again. I get where Sam is coming from. You know, it is a drop in the water compared to how much the government spend on other things. But just because the government spends so much on other things doesn't mean we need to add to that huge amount of spending that the government currently are in. By the way, it's our taxpayer money that they're spending on these campaigns. And I think that people are more than clever enough, more than capable enough to turn off the radiators themselves.
Well, they'll know because they're the ones that we're going to have to pay the bill. So if they think we're that stupid, I mean, we're stupid enough having to pay the damn things in the first place. In your view, in general, do you think, and very quickly, that the government intervene a bit too much in our daily lives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we look at sort of tobacco harm reduction, when we're looking at public health, I'm really glad that Therese Coffey is our health secretary now. I think that she understands that we know ourselves better, we know our health better than the government do. And I think it's this idea that the government somehow have more knowledge than we do.
We know that isn't true. Reem Ibrahim, thank you so much for joining me. She's a political commentator. Good to talk to her. Well, listen, thank you so much for all your thoughts as well. Before the break, I was discussing Nicola Sturgeon and her crusade for independence. Let's see what you've been saying. Mary says, Sturgeon is driving Scotland into the ground. I really think if she cared about the country, she would quit. Roger says, I can't believe Nicola Sturgeon is so militant with her mission for independence, but she doesn't want to give Scots living in England a vote. I wonder why. And Jean says there is no need to be insulting to the people of Scotland, and I would happily say all right and encourage people to vote to bin Westminster. Well, listen, to be honest with you, I think some of us might agree with you here. Thank you for those comments. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, are we turning into a nanny state? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and economist Lizzie Cundy, and also GB News presenter and father, Calvin Robinson. He's not a presenter and a father. You are. I suppose you are. You are a presenter and a father, but not that sort of father. Not the sort of father that Leo is. And at 5, it's time for difficult conversations. Universities have been told to let loved ones know if students are suffering from mental health problems, to stop youngsters from taking their own lives. I'll be joined by a man who tragically lost his 15-year-old son to suicide. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 4:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. 10 people have died, including a primary school girl, in an explosion at a service station in Ireland. 4 men, 3 women and 2 teenagers have also died. It's understood the petrol station was the hub of the village of Creesler in a tight-knit community. Northern Ireland's Fire and Rescue Service crossed the border to assist with the rescue efforts. The operation is now understood to have changed to a recovery mission, with emergency services already having worked right through the night. Irish police believe the explosion was an accident, but aren't ruling out other causes.
At this point in time, we have to keep an open mind as a police service and how we investigate this. But our information at this point in time is pointing towards a tragic accident. That said, being a Garda, I have to take a holistic and overall viewpoint, but that's where we're going at the moment.
In other news today, the serial killer Peter Tobin has died after becoming unwell in prison. It's understood he was taken from HMP Edinburgh to hospital earlier this week. He was serving a life sentence for raping and murdering Polish student Angelika Kluk. He was also serving 2 life sentences for the murders of 15-year-old schoolgirl Vicky Hamilton and 18-year-old Dinah McNichol in 1991. Their bodies were found 17 years later, buried in the garden of his former home in Kent. The UK has exported lamb to the United States for the first time since 1989. Prime Minister Liz Truss has hailed the move a milestone after President Joe Biden lifted his country's decades-old ban on imports of British meat in September last year. The market is worth an estimated £37 million in the first 5 years of trade. Celebrating the news on Twitter, Ms Truss said the move marked a well-deserved boost to our rural economy. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. It's back to Nana Akua in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon. If you've just joined us, where have you been? This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. And don't forget to download the GB News app where you can check out all of the different programmes here on the channel. Right, so we've got loads to do. It's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are we turning into a nanny state? Prime Minister Liz Truss has blocked a £15 million campaign this winter telling the UK how to save energy. I mean, why does the government feel they need to baby the general public? Think back to the instances where this has happened, like the sugar tax and then the infamous Hands, Face, Space campaign during the COVID pandemic. What do you think? Do we really need to be mollycoddled in this manner? Or is this energy advice much needed? So I thought for the Great British Debate this hour, I'd ask, are we turning into a nanny state? Let me see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also GB News presenter Father Calvin Robinson. Right, Lizzie, what do you think? Nanny state or not? Do we need to be told this sort of stuff?
No, we don't. I think Liz Truss was perfectly correct in what she did, and it's 15 million of taxpayers' money, which could go to much better causes. Give it to the nurses or someone else. And there's Sam Dowler, you know, scaremongering. And I know Sam, but he was at Christmas, you know, worried he was going to run out of Brussels sprouts and getting loads of toilet rolls in the pandemic.
Well, you can see he'd already got his tree out for Halloween.
He's panicking already. But this really is a storm in a teacup. And I think, as you said, Nana, don't underestimate the British public. We know what to do. You know, if you're in one room, just heat that room. Put a jumper on. If you're making a cup of tea, you don't have to put the, you know, loads of water in the kettle. Just do it for a cup. There are loads of things. But I do think, I know we're all very worried about what's going to happen, but surely the energy companies could come together and do something. If
they could do anything.
Oh, you could do it.
Silly.
Yeah, but
they're not going to help.
They're not getting the windfall tax now, are they? Maybe they could come together and put some tips down for people on how to save energy.
Well, you make a good point. There's somebody else better could do that. That wouldn't cost anything.
Someone else better could do it, and or even number 10, they don't have to pay 15 million. They could do it on Twitter or a Facebook login for people to have a look. But come on, I think most of the people know how to save energy.
Well, no, there are some stupid people out there. Let's be honest. But you can't mandate for the stupid people. Really, seriously, there's, you know, listen, most of the British public are quite intelligent. I agree, we do know. But I suppose what Sam was saying is that there are those people who do need to be mollycoddled and do need to be told, and therefore we're prepared to pay 15 million, which apparently isn't very much for them, for that.
Even if there are people that need to be mollycoddled, it's not the government's job to be doing the mollycoddling. I don't know why we've suddenly relied on the government to solve all our problems. They're there to defend the nation. That's pretty much it. Regulate large markets, prevent monopolies. They're not there to do much more than that. Every single issue we have now in society, whether it's cultural, legislative, doesn't matter. We always look to the government. And £15 million is a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
3 houses in central London, for goodness sake.
3 3? What, really? You think you get 3 for that?
But you see, no one that's going to jump on this bandwagon is Keir Starmer saying this is a government that don't care. And
that's the thing.
That's the thing that they're going to do. And they're going to play on that because they're big government, little society, thinking everyone's got to be told this is what to do. You know, and look, if we listened in the pandemic, didn't we? We listened to everything. Was it correct? I don't think the lockdown... Oh, we've got a lockdown crisis now because of the lockdowns.
That's what grates on me. You know, you said they'll say we don't care. We heard a minute ago, people will die if we don't spend this money. It's always the guilt trip. People will die if we don't do X, if we don't do Y. And that's how our liberties are getting stripped away. That's how the government is mandating tyrannous protocols and regimes that we have to follow. You know, why do we need to be told to wash our hands and to stand 2 meters apart?
Well, I mean, we have shared toilets. We have shared We have shared toilets here at GB News, and I've had to stop quite a few people said, "Hey, go back and wash your hands."
Well, that's fair enough. You could do that, but why do we have to get the government to pay or to spend our money to tell people to do that? It's ridiculous.
Exactly, and I think Liz Truss is right to put her foot down, and I don't agree with the business secretary on many things, and this is another one. I really think it's we don't need to be told we know.
I'm quite
you can
surprised.
just Google it, look it up.
I'm quite surprised that that's coming from him, actually, for him to say that, to be honest, because he seems to be somebody he doesn't like the nanny state. He seems to be somebody who is, you know, saying think for yourselves, and, you know, so I'm quite surprised he's saying that, but I think there is a case for some sort of public awareness campaign, but I don't think the government should be paying for that. I think the energy companies, they could mandate energy companies to put in information because the prices are so high. That's what I would do. I would, like you said, I'd mandate the energy companies to put in information in their next bills and packages, to email all their customers, to give them tips. I wouldn't be saying, I'm going to pay for it. Oh, give it to me, I'll do it. And then maybe hand these contractors and friends and family or whatever.
But are everyone going to listen to the government if they were to do it anyway? That's another point. I mean, why don't get people like Martin Lewis to do, you know, some bits? So everyone is in this together, and I do think the energy companies have a responsibility and should do something.
My energy bill's going up by about £400 this year. And I know it's going to be a lot worse for other people, but if the energy companies are taking that much more money from people, that's a significant amount. They should be obliged to give people tips and tricks on how to save some of that money.
Seems that the government seem to be so ready to spend our money. I mean, that 15 million is our money, right? So they're saying, we're going to spend your money on telling you how you could switch off your kettle, put this on at that time. No. Why don't the energy companies and the people who are putting the bills up and putting us in this situation in the first instance be the ones to explain to us how we can get the best out of it? Just like mobile phone companies have to tell you what the best tariff is for your usage, energy companies, and I think energy companies have to do something like that as well. I don't understand why they're going to spend money on some advertising.
And they're getting so much money, and as I said, they're not getting the windfall tax, so that's the least they could do. And as I said, we're all in it together, aren't we? So let's hope they do. But look, just Google it. It's quite easy. But then
so the government might argue that not everybody can get online. I mean, we take it for granted, but there are those who can't do that.
But there's daily tips in all the papers at the minute. It's everywhere. And there is help out there. You know, put a jumper on.
Put a jumper
on. The lights off.
Close the window.
Close the window.
What do you mean? I've got to shut the window?
Put some clothes on, as my mum would say. But, you know, I do think, as I said, the energy companies need to do a little something.
What about there's a lot of things that the government seem to be putting their finger in and sort of getting involved in. Do you think that perhaps a lot of this has come from, because of COVID, people have now become almost like expectant of help and support from the government for every single thing? So when something goes wrong, you know, people are saying, well, we want the government to give us more, we want the government to do more, not realising that they're actually asking the taxpayer to put more money in, and we are the government.
Yeah, what happened to personal responsibility? We see it everywhere. You know, the electric scooters, people saying the government needs to regulate about that. How about we just say, you know, if you're going to use one, use it on the road or use it sensibly. Or the police can tell people to get off the pavement if they're in the way. I don't know. Every single aspect of our lives, from Marks and Spencer's, removing chocolates from the cash point, near the cash point to near the back of the shop. Actually, sometimes I just want to grab a chocolate bar, my personal choice, my personal responsibility, if I want to grab one, to eat on the way out. It's like, why does every element of our lives have to be dictated from the government?
And if you drop your money, you stop and pick it up, don't you? Use your common sense.
It's a bit like the sugar tax when they sort of put in the artificial sweeteners. Now, I love sugar, and the artificial sweeteners, in my view, aren't very safe, and they taste horrible. They've got a bitter aftertaste, and I can control my intake of sugar by deciding that I'm going to have this one now, and I'm not going to have that, and I'm not happy with the government putting awfulness inside something that I know. I know what sugar is. I don't know what aspartame is. I don't know what saccharin is. I don't know what they are. I don't know whether they have any other neurological effects. So I know there's been reports on a lot of them that some of them aren't really as good as they're not that great for you. And for me personally, I don't fancy that. But I can't find my favourite ginger beer that is without this artificial nonsense in it. They've ruined it. And I'm like, why should I be forced to have that when, and this is a nanny state government, they've mandated that these people have to reduce the sugar, the sugar taxes, so these companies have behaved in that way.
Well, at least Liz Truss is against this stuff, so she did say she's going to go the opposite direction of sugar taxes and all of that stuff. Thank goodness.
But you have to be responsible for yourself.
Yeah, of course you do.
You really do. You're grown up.
Well, personal responsibility, I mean, that's the thing. But I'll tell you what, if you just join me, where have you been? This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. And as ever, this show is nothing without you and your views. So should we welcome on our great British voice? Wondering where should we go? Your opportunity to tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. Let's head over to Bristol. They have a lovely zoo in Bristol. Have you been to Bristol Zoo? Let's speak to one of the animals, Lee Harris. Sorry, Lee. Lee, so what do you think? What's your view, Liz Truss? Is she right, first of all?
Oh yeah, she was right to block it. I'm in complete agreement with the entire panel. I think it's just Sam on his own, poor soul, is the only person that doesn't think it was or thinks it was a good idea. But for starters, I do agree that in some specific cases there is a time and a place for a public information campaign. But I am generally, especially agreeing with what Calvin was just saying, I am not a huge fan of a government that patronises people by telling them how to live their lives. And for something like saving energy, it is completely unnecessary. Over many years, there's been a huge increase in public awareness about how to use less energy. And, in my view, more importantly, how to save money on your energy bills. There's been leaflets, adverts. I just checked and we've had advice from our own energy supplier on how to save energy. There's been online campaigns, you name it. And if you miss that, you can easily find information on the internet, and most of it's just common sense. But I agree with pretty much everything that you guys have said. In my view, it is a waste of money, and if we did it, we'd essentially be treating people like fools. And the government's confirmed anyway that it's going to be looking to signpost existing public advice. And just for an example, I googled how to save energy at home earlier. And it's literally an endless, there's an endless amount of really easy to understand information right at your fingertips. And I hear your point about not everyone's got access to the internet, but I did check. And as of January 2022, 98% of the population has access to the internet. That's pretty big. So there's not going to be a huge amount of people that don't catch this information. Like you said, we're all being pretty much pre-programmed to try and look after the environment and save energy anyway. I just think it treats people like, I believe most people are grown-ups and they understand, I took a bit of grief on Twitter for saying that earlier, and understand the basics of how to save energy and don't need the government to spoon-feed it to them.
Well, Lee, there you go. Thank you very much for your thoughts. That's Lee Harris. He's there in Bristol. He's our great British voice for this hour. So today I'm asking, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts, whether you think we're turning into a nanny state. Tony says it's not turning, it's turned. We're no longer allowed to think for ourselves. Barry says there is no need for a nanny state. We can think for ourselves. Exactly. They don't realise it, do they? What do you think? They don't realise it. Do you think they don't actually realise that we can think for ourselves? The government, they think we're that stupid.
It's quite a patronising approach to the British public, isn't it? To assume that we don't know what
I think it's actually really underestimating us, and I think it's actually quite disrespectful.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to spend I'd like to tell them what we want to spend that 15 million on. Barbara says we are already a nanny state. I'm old enough to know how to handle myself. Yeah. Thank you very much. Steve says, I don't need the government to tell me to reduce energy use or to tell me how to do it. I started saving energy a long while ago. I'm a pensioner. I'm quite capable of managing my energy usage without some stupid advertising campaign. Well, there you have it. Most people feel they can do it themselves. We don't need the £50 million campaign. Liz Truss is spot on with that one. There's also a poll-up on Twitter throughout the show asking, are we turning into a nanny state? And currently, what do you think, Calvin?
I will say 72% say yes.
Lizzie?
Yeah, I'm going to beat you 80%.
You're going to up it to 80? I'm afraid it's 90. See, we're not stupid. 90% of you say yes, we are, and 10% of you say no. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, it's Royal Roundup time, and Richard Fitzwilliams will be joining me to discuss all the latest gossip, including Courtiers, the new royal book, which is launched this week, and some of the extracts have been very, very dramatic. And as always, we'll be getting the latest on Harry and Meghan. How could we resist? You won't want to miss it.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon. If you just joined me, why on earth have you just joined me now? We've got loads still to come, though, so do stay tuned. Stanley Johnson will be in the studio with the director of Net Zero Watch. We're discussing whether net zero will make us richer or poorer. That's not one to miss. That's in the next hour. If you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Now, there's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. And every Saturday, I like to give you a little bit of a rundown. So I'm joined now by royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams to give us the very latest. Richard, what's been going on?
Well, what's been going on? Firstly, a lot of speculation about the coronation. There's no official date set, but talking about June next year, and the likelihood, I'd say the certainty, is going to be a bank holiday. Apparently, the business secretary is in favour, so it's reported. And I mean, it definitely is going to be a fabulous occasion.
It should be a bank holiday, though. I can't wait. It's going to be wonderful, isn't it?
Well, the world can't wait either. Of course, it won't be the same as 1953 because there were 8,000 guests. Now they're looking at reportedly perhaps 2,000. I mean, there were 45,000 troops in one sort or another. I mean, obviously, that will be heavily scaled back. It's a completely different era. And again, the ceremony is not likely to last for 3 hours, and it's more likely to be interdenominational in certain respects, though it will be, of course, the Church of England ritual, as you know, when Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, said he wanted to be a defender of faith. He has subsequently rode back from that and taken the Queen's definition in her Diamond Jubilee year that the Church of England was an umbrella under which other faiths could flourish.
Yeah.
So we'll look forward very much to...
There's a date, though. We've got the date there, haven't we?
No, we haven't,
got a date.
We have... there have been all sorts of rumours. But it was June the 2nd, 1953. They thought that meant good weather. The weather was absolutely terrible.
Oh, no.
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Well, we want a heat wave day. I love the hot weather.
Well, not a heat wave.
Oh, I do.
Mild, but pleasant,
Mild
sunny.
pleasant,
That's
not too
what we
hot.
need.
That's what we want. So there's the coronation. What else have we got? Harry and Meghan, they've got to be doing stuff.
Well,
They're
Harry and
always doing
Meghan
something.
released some photographs. I don't know whether we've got,
the
copies
photographs?
of them here, but we
haven't got the copies of them.
Well, I'll describe them because this was when Meghan made that speech, mostly about herself, I have to say, when
Really?
she was at the gathering of One Young World. Yes, you find it hard to believe. Yes, indeed. But no. It was actually an occasion where she's a good speaker. She can galvanise audiences. I just wish she'd do it more constructively sometimes. But these photographs, they came a couple of days after the official photographs of the King, the Queen Consort, the Prince and Princess of Wales, which were released by the palace. And they came in exactly the same day as the first joint engagement of the King and the Queen Consort in Dunfermline in Scotland. I just wish they'd align themselves a bit more with the royal diaries. Since they moved to the United States, they simply don't care if there's a clash. And it's important from a PR point of view.
Well, describe the picture then, because you said you could describe them. So
Well, yes, because there is Meghan in very bright red, right in the centre, and Harry, they're holding hands, and Harry, this is the colour photograph, Harry is sort of rather sheepish and at the back, and it's really not these messages they should be sending. There's a very good, Misan Harriman, the celebrity photographer, took them. There's a very good black and white one, which does show the two of them holding hands and looking rather inspirational for One Young World. That's what they should be doing. But this was rather curious. There's also a strange report in the Telegraph about the Netflix documentary they're involved in. Now, according to the Telegraph, now the Queen, sadly, is no longer with us, there may be no holds barred. And that would mean something that the palace will not be looking forward to, because there was always this respect for the Queen that they had, or said they had, and even though they caused the monarchy, as you very well know, a lot of trouble in recent years, especially with the Oprah interview. The thought here is that Netflix and Harry's memoir could together conceivably be real dynamite.
Yeah, I think that might be dynamite, but I think it might explode in the wrong direction, and I think it might be, in a sense, something that would ruin not the royal family. I think it will work the other way, because it seems in America there seems to be very tiring of the Sussexes now, and they're not held in high regard in many parts of the world, and the Queen really was. And it is quite, in my view, distasteful to bring out memoirs of your family, especially someone who's deceased, if they do have the Queen in there, and then start sort of either talking them down. I don't think that'll work in their interest. And they did split with their PR, didn't they? So do you think that there's something in that?
I think so far as PR is concerned, they arrange that as they like. I just wish they'd coordinate activities with the palace, but very clearly, since it's not expected, again, I'm dealing with rumours and reports, that Harry's memoirs, if and when they come out, that the palace will receive an advance copy. This sort of thing, obviously, King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla need all the help and support they could get, and that is what they should be giving them, because they only get the work because they are royal.
Well,
and the other important thing was the launch of the book Courtiers.
The book Courtiers, and that's
by
hard,
Valentine Lowe, the Times royal correspondent. It's absolutely excellent. It was he who first brought to light the allegations strongly denied by the Sussexes that there was bullying.
Have you read the book?
I read a lot of the book. I read just last night, in fact, that
Did
I
you?
got hold of it. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's the courtiers, there's the oil that keep, so to speak, the wheels turning of monarchy. And he has quite a lot to say. Firstly, another fascinating part about the notorious interview that Andrew gave to Newsnight and how that managed to come to life, if that's the word for it. And also, of course, the bullying allegations are gone into. And, of course, he gives an idea of some thoughts that he has for how courtiers the background, a different type of person, perhaps for the monarchy of the future, because courtiers do tend to come from, on the whole, one class and one section of society, and they traditionally have, and he wants that democratised. So he writes very well.
Wow, sounds like a great book. It's something that I would definitely be interested in reading. I mean, I've read Revenge, which I thought was rather good. I'm on Camilla now at the moment. Do you think now we've sort of found a new place? Because, you know, I think people are getting back into books, and especially The Crown may have been something that sort of energised people's interest in the royal family. Do you think that all these books are now actually, in a sense, working in the favour of the royal family, even though, you know, because they're not all that positive about Harry and Meghan. Harry and Meghan can bring out their own book if they like, but that's the majority of books don't paint them in a very nice light.
But it's very difficult to know who the books influence and who reads them. I mean, you mentioned The Crown. We've got it back in early November. Now, since it's dealing with the 1990s, which was an absolutely disastrous decade for the royal family, as we all know, it doesn't have to invent anything this time, because series 3 and 4, it was absolutely deplorable. Peter Morgan said that one thing you mustn't desert is truth, even if you're sometimes you change the facts, as obviously you do in the
But that's lying, then, isn't it, when you change the facts?
Yes, but he changed the way the Crown mocks the royals in series 3 and 4. I had a Faustian pact with it in series 1 and 2. It was so fascinating to watch, such a good cast. But nonetheless, what they really were at with Olivia Colman replacing Claire Foy, she was no good, I thought. No dignity, no feeling. She was cold and aloof, the very things the Queen was not. We'll see Imelda Staunton, and I'm dreading it.
Well, listen, Richard Fitzwilliam, thank you very much for that big old royal update. Fabulous. I must get some of those books. That's Richard Fitzwilliams. He's a royal commentator. More to come in the next hour. Right, this is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. And for the next hour, as ever, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. On the way, difficult conversations. Now, I'll be speaking to a father who lost his son to suicide and who has since set up a charity to help others cope with this kind of loss. Then Stanley Johnson will be in the studio discussing whether net zero will make us richer or a whole lot poorer. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 5. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. 10 people have died, including a primary school girl, in an explosion at a service station in County Donegal in Ireland. 4 men, 3 women and 2 teenagers have also died. It's understood the petrol station was the hub of the village of Creesler in a tight-knit community. Northern Ireland's Fire and Rescue Service, who crossed the border to assist with the search and rescue efforts, left the scene a short while ago. The operation is now understood to have changed to a recovery mission, with emergency services already having worked right through the night. Irish police believe the explosion was an accident, but aren't ruling out other causes.
At this point in time, we have to keep an open mind as a police service and how we investigate this. But at this, our information at this point in time is pointing towards a tragic accident. That said, being a Garda, I have to take a holistic and overall viewpoint. But that's where we're going at the moment.
Member of the House of Lords and former Deputy Leader of the DUP, Lord Nigel Dodds, has called the incident horrendous.
One of us can relate to calling into a filling station or wanting to call in and get some groceries or a snack or something, and to be caught up in something like this is just horrendous. And when you hear those who've died include men, women, teenagers, a young child, it really is awful. Our hearts and prayers are with the bereaved of those who have lost their lives, and obviously hope and pray that those that have been injured make a swift recovery.
In other news, the serial killer Peter Tobin has died after becoming unwell in prison. He was taken to hospital from HMP Edinburgh, where he was serving 3 life sentences for the rape and murder of Polish student Angelika Kluk and the murders of teenagers Vicky Hamilton and Diana McNichol in 1991. Their bodies were found buried in the garden of his former home in Margate in Kent 17 years later. Police questioned Tobin about other murders they believe he may have committed, but he refused to give any details. The UK has exported lamb to the United States for the first time since 1989. The Prime Minister has hailed the move a milestone after President Joe Biden lifted the decades-old ban on British meat imports in September last year. The market is worth an estimated £37 million in the first 5 years of trade. Celebrating the news on Twitter, Liz Truss said the move marks a well-deserved boost to our rural economy. Only around 1 in 5 trains are running today across Scotland, England and Wales. Members of the RMT union are staging their 8th strike this year in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. The train operator's chief negotiator, Tim Shoveler, says passengers should only travel by train if absolutely necessary. RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch has warned of further strikes to come. A large explosion has seriously damaged the only road and rail bridge linking the occupied Crimean Peninsula to Russia. Russian authorities say 3 people have died in the blast on the Kerch Bridge, but it's not yet clear if it was a deliberate attack. Ukraine haven't claimed responsibility. The bridge, which is the longest in Europe, is crucial to supplying the peninsula and Russian forces across Ukraine. Large queues of cars and buses are now starting to cross again, but heavy goods vehicles and trains are still stuck. And thousands of people have formed a human chain around Parliament calling for the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Mr. Assange is currently being held in London's Belmarsh prison amid a legal battle to avoid extradition to the US, where he could face a prison sentence of up to 175 years. He's wanted in America over the leak of secret military information. Former PR advisor Richard Hillgrove says it's important for journalism that Assange is freed.
The fact that this is being led not so much from Don't Extradite Assange again, but the National Union of Journalists and the International Federation of Journalists, which has 600,000 members globally, leading this exercise means, the penny is dropping that this is not, this is political. This puts journalism in the firing line. If Assange goes down, journalism goes down.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also GB News presenter Father Calvin Robinson. Still to come. In difficult conversations, universities have been told to contact students' loved ones if they fear that someone is suffering from mental health problems. We'll hear the tragic story of a father who lost his 15-year-old son to suicide and how his charity, the Ollie Foundation, aims to help others. For our Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will net zero make us richer or poorer? Prime Minister Liz Truss renewed her commitment to achieving net zero by 2050, but some claim it will worsen the cost of living and energy crisis, leaving the poorest in society worst off. Conservationalist and former MEP Stanley Johnson, the director of Net Zero Watch, will be joining me and going head to head. As ever, email me your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or send me that tweet at gbnews. Now it's time for difficult conversations. And according to new guidance, universities have been told to contact loved ones if they fear a student is suffering from mental health problems in order to prevent suicide among younger generations. All institutions will now be able to do this without getting permission from the student in question. Universities UK has said it needs to be more proactive in preventing such tragedies from occurring. Now, our guest, Stuart Falconer, tragically lost his 15-year-old son, Morgan, believed to be from suicide. He described his son as the sweetest boy you could ever meet. And following his son's death, Stuart thought that his life would be pointless if he didn't find something that would at least make sure that others would understand and he could help others going through this. So he's now turned his pain of losing his son into something positive, setting up the Ollie Foundation with 2 other parents. So I'm pleased to say that Stuart joins me here in the studio. Stuart, thank you so much for joining me. Stuart, so it's very sad. It's very tragic because your son, he was absolutely adorable. Tell me a little bit about Morgan.
Well, as you said, Morgan was the sweetest boy you could meet. He wouldn't have harmed anyone. He had a cheeky grin, a zest for life, and you know, when he died, it was a massive shock because you would never have imagined someone like Morgan taking his own life. But I do have fond memories of the laughter we had, the joy we had in the short time he was around.
Oh. And were there any clues or any signs that he was struggling in any way?
No, I mean, he was 15 years old. I mean, I don't know what you were like when you were 15, but when I was 15, you had your life ahead of you, but you didn't know anything different. You were just living your life day by day. So he didn't appear to have any issues. I mean, he had exams. He was a 15-year-old boy, so what challenges did a 15-year-old boy have? He had exams, he'd have gone through puberty, he would have had girl issues, you know, all the sorts of stuff that most kids would have gone through, so nothing out of the ordinary.
Nothing out of the ordinary. So for you, having to go through this, you know, how has it kind of changed your life and maybe your outlook on things?
Life is very different now for me than what it was then. I mean, it's taken a long time to reach a point now where I've learnt that I have a life to lead. I think for the first 3 or 4 years I was in shock. I didn't know how to get by day. I set up the charity. But that was more of a distraction, so I didn't have to think about the trauma of losing Morgan. But as time went on, I realised that I also had a life. So actually what I need to do now is spend the rest of my time doing the things I want to do, being in a good place and enjoying the life that I've got. But it didn't happen overnight. It took a number of years to reach that point, like 3 or 4 years before I could even think about having a life.
Yeah, how did you get through all of that?
Drinking. Drinking was helping a lot to just distract. I didn't want to be in that space. You know, you could wake up every morning in tears. You could wake up or just even drive. I remember driving the car and bursting out into tears, listening to Barbra Streisand. I'm not a Barbra Streisand fan, but I just couldn't stop crying. So initially, a lot of distraction to stop thinking about Morgan, because actually when Morgan died, you find yourself drawn towards his death as opposed to his life. So the first few years, all you're thinking, when you think about Morgan, you're thinking about the day he died and how traumatic that was. But in time, you can recover from that and start to think about his life in a more positive way.
Yeah, very, very difficult to deal with, really difficult to deal with. And Morgan has a brother. So how did his brother cope?
Well, I mean, we're all different. Every individual's different. And one of the things that Jake did that we were shocked at the time, but he went back to school the next day. I think he needed the distraction. I don't think he would have benefited from being around me and his mum, because we were in shock, devastated. And of course he was devastated, but I think it was really important for him to make a choice to go back to school, study for his exams, and actually he did that really well. So that was his way of coping at the time.
And do you get to talk to him about it at all?
We do. You know, we're very... You know, we're open about it. I think, you know, what we all know now is that by not talking about it, people will create their own narratives, they'll create their own stories and their own perceptions of what suicide means to them. So I constantly talk to him, or me and his mum, we like to have those conversations, not just about mental health and suicide, but about Jake, what's he experiencing now, the challenges that he faces. As long as we're having open conversations, then we're better equipped to deal with stuff as and when it comes along.
And what do you think of this idea that universities now, friends of the person who's maybe suffering in some way, are able to get in touch with parents and things?
It's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if at the moment, it's not uncommon for students to be at university, have suicidal thoughts, even potentially make attempts at taking their own lives, and no one's told about it, and the parents aren't told about it. I mean, I also volunteer for an organisation called SOBS, Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide. I meet a lot of people, and a lot of people have been through the university system who had concerns about their children but weren't told that they'd made attempts on their own life. How can that be right? Anything that happens that can protect a young person, it's just a no-brainer.
Now, you set up a charity, Ollie. What does that stand for, and what does it do?
It's One Life Lost is Enough. We are a training organisation, so we try and train people that work with young people. We train them how to have conversations around a difficult topic. So there's a number of things we do. So one thing is a safe talk. It's like a half-day course. We teach people how do you start a conversation with someone you might be concerned around. Assist training is more about what do you do once you found out that someone is suicidal? What steps can you put in place to keep that person safe? So that's all about safe plans. So safe plans is around creating a plan for an individual so if they do have concerns about their own well-being or they're feeling like under pressure or anxious, they look at the plan and there are steps that they can take to keep themselves safe. So we try and educate people in all sectors around having those types of conversations.
And have you found there's a real need for that?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Undoubtedly. I mean, my generation, I think we're probably the cusp of the generation that's starting to understand mental health a bit better. The younger generation are being taught that now. Certainly my parents' generation would never have had these conversations at all. So actually it is making a massive difference, you know, because just to have a conversation is hard enough. People don't like talking to me about my loss, you know. People would prefer not to talk to me about my loss, and if you could talk to anyone, it'd be me, right? So the idea that you can actually have a conversation with someone is a really traumatic one for a lot of people. But take a risk, have that conversation. What's the worst that can happen? You can't put the idea in someone's mind, but you can open them up to a conversation. I can tell you that when people do say, yeah, do you know what, I'm struggling, it's a relief. They've released the tension and now you can have a conversation about it.
So where are you now in your life now? You
Personally?
Yeah.
Well, the Ollie Foundation has a team now. So we have a CEO, we have a number of members of staff, a really fully functioning board of trustees. So where I'm at now is I like to support the charity by doing things like this. I'll do talks on my loss and the charity, but also what I do with SOBs. I facilitate a group of SOBs where I help other people who have been bereaved by suicide. But where I'm at right now is I've got a life to lead. You know, I've spent so long in my life being like, I guess, feeling sorry for myself, you know, that I'd lost my son. It's like probably the most traumatic thing that you could probably experience. But actually, I still have a life to lead. And I don't want to live my life regretting things that I didn't do, that I could have done, that I chose not to do because, you know, I've had a difficult moment. So I just come back from a cruise, a 2-week cruise around Northern Europe.
Did you feel a sense of guilt, though, that you were still around to enjoy things?
Oh, maybe, look, initially, yeah, absolutely.
But you've been on a cruise now.
I've been on a cruise,
Where'd you go? Talk to me. What was
Northern Europe. Went around Northern Europe. France, Holland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Belgium. Loved it.
Did you go on your own?
I did.
You went on your own?
I did.
Was it Saga?
No.
Because you're not
it was a joke, yeah. Yeah.
It was a joke.
It was very good joke, yeah. No, it was Norwegian Cruise Lines. But see, I was on my own, so I took a punt. I felt like if I wait for someone, I might never go. So I took the risk and thought, no, just do it, go on your own. So again, right now, for me in my stage of life is, I have a life. Don't waste it, don't let it pass me by. So make the most of it, do the best I can.
Well, listen, Morgan would be very proud of what you're doing now. The charity
I hope so.
is awesome. If people want to help out with the charity or find out more, where can they go to find out?
The Ollie Foundation, theolliefoundation.org. Ollie spelled O-L-L-I-E. One Life Lost is Enough. There's loads of information on there about how we can be supported.
Well, Stuart, thank you so much for coming in to talk to me about that. That is Stuart Falconer. He lost his son through suicide and has set up the Ollie Foundation. So on the way, this is the Great British Debate. It will be on the way in the next hour. And I'm asking, will net zero make us richer or poorer? Now, Prime Minister Liz Truss renewed her commitment to achieving net zero by 2050. But some claim that it will worsen the cost of living crisis. That's all on the way. But first, let's get an update with your weather.
So looking ahead to this evening's weather then, and the UK looking mostly fine with clear, sunny spells. A few showers though in the northwest. Let's home in. It's going to be a dry start to the evening across the southwest of England. Fairly clear skies and no more than a gentle wind blowing. Then high pressure will be in charge of the weather across the southeast, keeping it dry and settled with long, clear periods developing. Some patchy cloud drifting in across Wales, but the weather's staying fine there, and some also clear spells at times. And a similar weather setup expected as we head across to the Midlands, and the day ending on a quiet note with a good deal of dry and at times reasonably clear weather all round. Away from the North Pennines, where we could see some cloud, the northeast of England heading into the evening on a fine note as well. A slight southwesterly breeze is expected though. And that breeze fairly noticeable as we head north towards Scotland, although there will be clear spells in the east. Further west, more in the way of cloud, and showers expected there as well. Northern Ireland could catch a shower or two as well, but mainly towards the north and the west of the province and elsewhere. Although it will be a little breezy, the weather does look fine. So turning chilly across southern and eastern areas overnight under broken cloud. Meanwhile, winds strengthening in the northwest with rain arriving. And that's how the weather's shaping up this Sunday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. If you just joined us, we are the People's Channel. Remember, you can watch the show, you can stream it live on YouTube. Now, it is time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, will net zero make us richer or considerably poorer? In the Prime Minister's conference speech on Wednesday, Liz Truss reassured members of Number 10's commitment to net zero.
We're opening more gas fields in the North Sea and delivering more renewables and nuclear energy. This is how we will protect the great British environment, deliver on our commitment to net zero and tackle climate change.
So despite this, many believe that pursuing net zero would worsen the cost of living and energy crisis, hitting the poorest in society. So is it right that the UK government spends what the Climate Change Committee estimates to be £1.5 trillion to reach net zero? However, former Energy Ministry Chris Skidmore MP, who is leading a review into finding the quickest and most effective way to reach net zero, believes net zero can make us warmer and richer. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will net zero make us richer or poorer? I'm joined now in the studio by Stanley Johnson. He's an ambassador for the Conservative Environment Network. So Stanley, net zero, a lot of people complaining about it and saying it's going to make us all really poor. What's your view on it? Is it necessary?
It is inevitable. We've got to do this. We absolutely have to do this. It's the climate crisis, the climate change issue. It confronts us all, and we have to play our part. And it was very good. I was in Birmingham, by the way, and I was very pleased to hear Liz Truss make that clear statement, because honestly, as you probably remember, quite a lot of her speech was focused on growth, growth, growth. And of course, growth is vital, but growth without these environmental steps is not going to work. It will make us, net zero will actually make us richer in so many ways, in the sense we'll be having a survivable planet to be in. And if that isn't being rich, I don't know what is. So we're confronted with it, we're committed to it, and I think we're going to make a success of it.
Do you think, but a lot of people are saying, OK, to get net zero, I've got to buy an electric car. That's about 44 grand or so. A lot of people don't have that money. Even the price of heat pumps and things like that, they're very expensive. People can't afford it. So it's almost an unachievable goal. I think a lot of people will be seeing that.
I don't think it is unachievable. If I may just, quote Boris for a moment, if I may, but I'm really quoting the former Prime Minister, who spoke, for example, about the extraordinary capacity these islands have in terms of renewable energy, wind power, wave power. These are real assets which we can do. We don't, of course, have to be 100% energy sufficient in this country. We can import, and we do import, and this is called, the terms of trade. This is called comparative advantage. But we are going to reduce our total emissions along with the rest of the world, and we are, I'm sure, going to get to net zero. And by the way, Alok Sharma is still the president of the COP26. I was in Glasgow. He made a terrific job. He kept them all on the line. He said, this is an achievable target. And I think we'll get there, and we'll get there with the European Union and other major industrialized countries, including China. I've been spending a lot of time.
Where do you think, though, because a lot of countries aren't doing it? I mean, we account for a very small amount of the carbon emissions of the producers who do give out a lot of carbon. And what's the point if nobody else does it, but we're sort of the only ones? Because it doesn't seem like they're not all doing it.
It's simply not the case that we're the only ones. We were part of the European Union. The European Union played a major role in getting the so-called Paris Treaty of December 2015. We are still there. We are moving in lockstep, in fact, in this issue with the European Union. Now, actually, on the case, as you rightly say, there are other countries out there who are big emitters. China is one, India is one. But actually, seeing where they came from, they are making progress. Being fair, we were responsible for quite a lot of the carbon absorption in the atmosphere. Our century and a half of the Industrial Revolution, we used up quite a lot. And it is actually probably quite fair that we might actually make more of a proportional effort than these developing countries do.
OK, well, I mean, you make a good case for it. I hear you. Listen, I want to bring on, let's have a chat and see what Stanley, thank you for. Stay right there, because I'm also joined by the director of Net Zero Watch, Benny Pizer. Benny, look, net zero, Stanley makes a good case for it, that apparently if we don't do it, we could find ourselves in even more stuck. What do you think with regard to that, and whether households can actually afford this ideology or this concept?
Well, of course, I heard what Mr. Johnson had to say. It's the same mantra. We've heard this for the last 30 years. And as we can see, we're halfway to net zero, and energy costs are very low now, because as we were promised for the last 20, 30 years, that as we go to net zero, energy costs will come down. It will be very cheap. We will be richer, better off. But this is obviously tongue-in-cheek. The reality is that most European countries will experience the worst winter crisis in living memory. I expect a lot of governments to fall over this energy crisis, not least this current new government. They are prioritizing net zero over the cost of living. They're prioritizing net zero over the cost of energy. And it's no surprise that people won't be able to heat their homes and will blame the government for the utter disaster. So there's no question in my mind that the political elite will stick to net zero. But when people have to heat their homes and pay their bills, they will have a second thought about it.
Has also been signed into law, hasn't it, that it should be reached by 2050. Is that realistic? And I know the Labour Party in this country was saying that they want zero carbon, or what, I can't remember what their slogan is, but something similar by 2030. I mean, how realistic are these targets in any case? Is it wise to put a number on it like that?
Well, it's obviously completely unrealistic, and I very much doubt any government that continues with these net zero targets will survive contact with reality. This government is unlikely to survive. As I said, any government that prioritizes net zero over the survival of the economy and the well-being of a nation will not survive. So in my view, it is just a question of time when net zero targets will be buried. It might not be this government, it might not be the next government, but net zero and economic growth cannot go hand in hand. You either have to save the economy, you either have to bring down the cost of energy, or you remain a green fanatic for whom net zero is the top priority.
Well, listen, I'm going to bring Stanley into the conversation, Stanley Johnson, to respond to that. Stanley, you've heard what Benny's saying.
Benny, I'm certainly not a green fanatic, but if you talk about the well-being of the nation, as far as I'm concerned, the well-being of the nation does not depend wholly on the rate of economic growth. But I will say you won't get economic growth in any case unless you move firmly on a great range of these environmental issues, and carbon emissions is just one of them. So I am 100% convinced that the people as a whole, just take one thing if I may, there's a proposal out there by Jacob Rees-Mogg to scrap all the EU regulations which derive from EU law, which is still in place in this country. The outcry which has been created by Jacob Rees-Mogg's proposal to scrap EU retained law, including a lot of the emissions stuff and the environmental planning stuff, is extraordinary. So I don't believe the people are not going to be behind the government as they stick firmly to their net zero pledges. I'm convinced they will.
Benny, to you to respond.
Look, we know that the Conservative Party is deeply divided over net zero and the green agenda. We know that half of the parliamentary party is basically an environmental movement. As I said, whose priority is net zero. That is their main priority. Any policy that undermines net zero is being opposed. We know that Zach Goldsmith even said he would prefer a Labour government to a prime minister who waters down net zero. So we know that the Conservatives are deeply split, and they will. And mind you, once Labour is in power, and I suspect that after the next election will be the case, they will be just struggling about net zero as the Conservatives today. Because, as I said, you can only decarbonize an economy if you take the people with you, and you can only take the people with you if you don't make life a misery for them.
Well, Benny, we have got this crisis at the moment in Ukraine. And what was that partly caused by? It was partly caused by the fact that Germany denuclearized very, very rapidly and said we can buy all our fuel imports from Russia. Part of our proposal, part of the Labour government's proposal, not that we have a Labour government yet, a Labour opposition proposal, is actually to do much more on nuclear power. And I think that's right as well. I mentioned renewables, but nuclear power has to be part of that mix too. I am 100% convinced that the Conservative Party, and I do, as it were, have some contact with them because at least 100 members of the current Conservative Party in Parliament are also members of the Conservative Environment Network. Don't get me wrong, they are still behind the government's policy, and I think they'll stay that way.
Well, look, Benny, I'll give you the last word. You've got about a minute.
Yeah, we already heard that this environmental movement in the Conservative Party is planning to oppose the government on fracking. They're trying to work with the opposition to bring it down, to kill fracking. So I don't have much trust in the environmental movement, in the Conservatives. They should go to the Green Party where they belong.
Well, listen, Benny, thank you very much for that. That's Benny Pizer. He's the director of Net Zero Watch. And also Stanley Johnson. He's the ambassador for Conservative Environmental Network. Well, what are your thoughts? Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Elliot says it's completely uncosted, runs to an unrealistic timetable, and involves the need to rapidly invent or improve technology we either don't have yet. Adrian says this with regard to net zero, whether it will make us richer or poor. The agenda is unachievable and the cost to try to get there will be enormous. The taxpayer will have to pay, so we will all be poorer. And Phil says we refuse to use energy to manufacture products whilst others who use fossil fuels sell us their manufacturers' goods. Well, that is a good point. That is true. Well, keep coming. Keep your thoughts coming, because this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. We'll continue our Great British debate in this hour. I'm asking, will net zero make us richer or poorer? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also GB News presenter Father Calvin Robinson. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Nana. It's 5:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. 10 people have died, including a primary school girl, in an explosion at a service station in County Donegal in Ireland. 4 men, 3 women and 2 teenagers have also died. It's understood the petrol station was the hub of the village of Creesler in a tight-knit community. Northern Ireland's Fire and Rescue Service crossed the border to assist with the rescue efforts. The operation is now understood to have changed to a recovery mission. Irish police believe the explosion was an accident, but aren't ruling out other causes.
At this point in time, we have to keep an open mind as a police service and how we investigate this. But at this, our information at this point in time is pointing towards a tragic accident. That said, being a Garda, I have to take a holistic and overall viewpoint. But that's where we're going at the moment.
Police have been unable to gather any more information from serial killer Peter Tobin as they questioned him on his crimes on his deathbed. Tobin died in hospital after becoming unwell at HMP Edinburgh. He was serving a life sentence for raping and murdering Polish student Angelika Kluk and 2 life sentences for killing teenagers Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol in 1991. And the UK has exported lamb to the United States for the first time since 1989. Prime Minister Liz Truss has hailed the move as a milestone after President Joe Biden lifted his country's decades-old ban on imports of British meat in September last year. The market is worth an estimated £37 million in the first 5 years of trade. Celebrating the news on Twitter, Ms Truss said the move marked a well-deserved boost to our rural economy. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Nana Akua.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 38 minutes after 5 o'clock. Welcome on board if you've just tuned in. Where on earth have you been, though? I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. And it is time for our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, will net zero make us richer or considerably poorer? In the Prime Minister's conference speech on Wednesday, Liz Truss reassured members of Number 10's commitment to net zero. But many believe that pursuing net zero would worsen the cost of living and energy crisis, as we are witnessing right now. I mean, is it right that the UK government spends what the Climate Change Committee estimates to be around about £1.5 trillion to reach net zero? I mean, will we actually get this money back? Is it a goal worth reaching? That's another question. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, will net zero make us richer or poorer? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also GB News presenter, Father Calvin Robinson. All right, Lizzie, net zero, how are you feeling about it?
It's hurting us. There's no need for us to do it. I'm sorry, I think you and I are going to agree on this. But I just think, what is the point? When you look, I've got statistics here. We use 1% of the carbon global emissions. China, America, India are up there in the 20s. So if the rest of them aren't doing it, we should put our time and effort in trying to convince them maybe to do more. It's pointless and it's hurting our own economy. It makes no sense. It really doesn't. Stop getting excited about the 1%. I just don't understand why we have to have this deadline of 2030.
Well, that's what Keir Starmer's... What's his one called? Zero carbon or something. And then the Conservatives one is net zero. Same thing, different dates. Calvin?
Lizzie's absolutely right. China uses up about 30% of the world's global CO2 emissions. The US is far less than that. The EU is far less than that. If you look at them on a global scale, the UK is not even on that graph because we don't emit that much CO2. We've done so much since the 60s and even before that to reduce our emissions. But I'm not even convinced what we do as people affects the climate in general. I think it's all a big money-making scam. I think the climate has been changing for millennia. It always has changed. And the impact that we make is very small. But even if we do, as people, make an impact, the UK isn't making any impact, comparatively speaking, to the rest of the world. So what we have to ask is why we're spending so much money on net zero or carbon zero or net 3030, whatever it is. Where does this 2030 arbitrary year come from? Because it seems to be very, very, very rushed. Who benefits? Well, people producing wind farms, people producing solar panels.
Well, they've been subsidised, aren't they, at the moment?
There's a business in it.
Subsidies.
But they've been subsidised at the moment to make it look a lot cheaper, isn't it?
Not to forget the fuel duties and the levies put on top of all the energy prices that we're paying exorbitant amounts for at the moment. There are people making a lot of money from net zero.
Well, you say 1%. Now, I think the problem that we face with this 1%, because a lot of people think, oh, we only do 1%, is that the reason why we say, oh, China emits so much more is because we're buying the stuff from them. So we're buying, we buy a lot of things from China, and to produce those things that we're buying, they are using fossil fuels and things like that to produce those things. So whilst we say we're only using 1%, and it's only, that's what maybe we're producing from this country, but if we work out what we're importing and then obviously the carbon that is required to, create those things that we're importing, then we all contribute a lot more than that. So my argument is, well, we might as well just do it here and save all the travel.
Exactly.
Save the travel, because
produce our own goods, stop buying from China. Absolutely, for so many reasons.
China, for God's sake.
But even if taking that into consideration, CO2 makes up 0.04% of the atmosphere anyway, and that number isn't growing. So nothing's happening. I'm old enough to remember when the big scare was the ozone layer growing. What happened to that? It closes up every single year.
They got it wrong.
They continuously get it wrong. They keep telling us that the climate's going to catastrophize in the next 10 years, and 10 years comes and goes, and we're at the same place that we always were.
And actually, more people die of being in the cold than the heat.
Well, this winter will be the case, potentially, because we're going to net zero and people can't afford to heat their homes. So
the net zero people keep saying, 8,000 people will die of hot weather this year. Well, over 20,000 people die of cold weather every year, as Lizzie just said. Last year, it was about 60,000 people. So the people dying from cold is increasing. And this year, in the cost of lockdown crisis, when people have to choose between eating and heating, even more people are going to die of the cold.
Why are people so afraid of heat in this country? I mean, a little bit of sunshine, the aircon's on. I mean, I'm freezing.
It is freezing in here.
It's very cold in here. And
Why do they do this? It's like one little bit of sun, it's like, switch the aircons on.
They've done it for me. They thought I was having a menopausal moment. They're pretty really cold. No, but look, the thing is, the most important thing for any country is food, energy, defence. Let's not worry about this. And why is this deadline, as I said, 2030? Who put this deadline? Why is it this? Why? Calvin, you might know.
Well, I think the UN have been pushing for it, and if we look at who's invested in it, all of the biggest companies, richest people, most influential people in the world are all heavily invested in net zero because they benefit from it. There are too many vested interests.
Well, the irony is as well, whilst we're saying that we want to save the planet, we're spending a fortune sending missiles and weapons to a country that is emitting so much carbon, it's unbelievable, and there'll be radiation and all sorts of things. Obviously, we don't want war in any countries, but we have to be honest with ourselves. If we're genuinely saying that we're trying to save the planet, then the first things we need to address are things like war, because, you know, the amount of carbon and the amount of... Think of all the toxic chemicals and waste that is coming from, you know, those war-torn places.
Yeah, but we've got to protect the Ukraine.
Well, of course, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm saying that if we are genuine with our focus on protecting the planet, then A, we'd stop making things like nuclear weapons, B, we'd make sure that there weren't any wars and we'd work tooth and nail to stop them. Otherwise, that, you know, because they're emitting... I mean, like, think of the carbon footprint of somewhere like Ukraine at the moment. That's off the scale. It's not their fault, and it's, you know, this shouldn't be happening. But we need to be honest about this.
Well, we need to be honest, and people like Prince Harry really get my nerves, who go on about, you know, all of that, the environment, when he's taking private jets, you know, left, right and centre, you know, and we need a bit of honesty about it, and people are making big money out of this.
But even the Ukraine, you could argue that we have a role over there. I mean, I would argue otherwise, but you could very well argue that we do. But even if you do, you've got to admit there are people with vested interest in keeping this war going and keeping the money flowing into Ukraine, keeping the weapons flowing into the Ukraine, because people are benefiting.
So this whole drive to net zero seems a bit disingenuous because there's so many things happening that are partially within our control that we're not stopping. Yet we're going to force everyone to... We're going to force mining cobalt and all sorts of things from other countries in the world.
Which is wicked.
We're going to carry on, you know, flying back and forth in jets and everything else like that. Continue importing loads of materials, using the carbon and all the things that we need. We're going to keep making electric cars and get rid of our currently perfectly well-working ones. We're not going to mine the things that exist in our own environment, like the gas and the oil that we have. And we're going to set up a load of windmills. We need the carbon, though, to make them. And then we're going to kill a load of animals who get trapped in the bits under there. But don't worry about all of that.
King Charles has got masks for them, didn't he? He wanted the masks on the cows. But we've got an energy crisis, and then we've got electric cars. It doesn't kind of make sense. And where I live in the rural area, there aren't any points anyway.
Well, they're wicked. The electric car idea is wicked, because what people forget when they say get an electric car instead of a petrol car is that actually it takes so many resources to make the electric car, and then the batteries that we have for them, we have slave labour to get the cobalt. You've talked about it before. To mine the stuff, it's child labour. It's disgusting.
But there's no carbon, though, Kat.
But then what do you do when they conk out? What happens then? What do you do with them? You know?
Instead, we should have normal petrol cars. We should open the coal mines again. We should get nuclear on the go and get fracking and get self-sufficient on our own energy.
We need energy independence. That's the whole thing. And we've let it go with long-term decisions, not just this government, the other governments, long-term decisions.
Successive.
We let our gas reserve go in 2017, and we haven't been efficient.
Well, net zero is the bank balance by the end of all of this. Right, this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome some of our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show. Tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Oh, and I've got two today. Let's start with Dr. Seshni Mudlia, who's joining us from Milton Keynes, Seshni. And also Mike Donovan there, he's joining us from Oxfordshire. Let's start with you, Seshni. Net zero, are you up for it? Are we going to be richer or poorer?
Good evening, Nana. An excellent show and coverage on mental health before this. This is such an interesting discussion, Nana, and I think it's going to make us poorer. I agree with the panel. We are thinking that, you know, my husband and I, we've been looking at getting an electric car and looking at the initial costs. And then, as you heard from Calvin that was mentioning about the batteries, I'm told that the batteries for the electric cars actually cost half the price of the car. So it's actually going to cost us more in the long run, and definitely I think it's going to make us poorer. I'm all for saving the planet and for achieving net zero, but we need to think about the economy and how it's going to affect everyone.
We also need to be saving our money too. Mike Donovan, your thoughts?
Hi, Nana. Well, it's going to make everyone poorer. First of all, we've got to start producing goods in this country again. But I agree with your panelist. I mean, follow the money trail. There's huge investment in the science behind climate change, but actually, if you listen to alternative scientists who don't get a lot of hearing today, I think it's about 30 billion the US spend on climate change. Greta Thunberg gets $1 million a year funded by the One Foundation, which is Soros, Bono, and the Gates Foundation. There's a lot of money that's going into it, and people ask, what is the agenda? Well, there's a very clear agenda, and that's Agenda 21. There is definitely a movement for global organization. And who are the people benefiting from that? We call it a cost of living crisis today. It's a cost of production crisis. God's sake, our lifestyles have reduced by about a factor of 4 since over the last 30 years. And you're right, it's successive governments. We've sold off our assets. We don't produce anything anymore. The only person who's going to suffer is the taxpayer and the poor person.
That's always the person that suffers, which is you and I, everybody. Seshni, thank you very much. And also Mike Donovan, good to talk to you. Those are our great British voices this hour. Thank you very much. And today I've been asking, will net zero make us richer or poorer? Lots of you have been getting in touch. Pamela says net zero is a disaster. It's not been thought out properly. For example, the government are promoting electric vehicles with no thought about the consequences on people who are disabled. I'm disabled and I cannot have an electric car. Pat says, I personally do not agree with net zero. I feel like it is a tool with which is used to curb people's choices unfairly, and net zero is not of interest to the majority of UK citizens. Jeanette says, we don't have to go along with net zero mission. I'm happy for us to do the best we can, but I do not want it forced on me, and especially because I think it's going to cost me more. And Kate says, at the end of the day, we need to do whatever we can to stop the planet being destroyed. If this means a few more windmills, then so be it. I refuse to allow environmental degradation to continue at the same rate. Well, I can tell you one thing with that one, the planet will survive. It's us on it that won't, and especially at the rate we're going. It won't be net zero that kills us, by the way. Now, here's a story that really shocked me. New footage has emerged of activists pouring milk all over displays on the floor in 2 high-end London department stores. The group Animal Rebellion, an offshoot of Extinction Rebellion, were protesting against the use of dairy products and advocating for what they call a plant-based future. They were damaging and destroying things alarmingly common, and why these eco-zealots are allowed to get away with it, I don't know. Let's see what my panel make of that. Calvin?
I hate it, Nana. I absolutely hate it. These people are disgusting. The only people that this affects is the cleaners. That are on low minimum wage have to clean up all this stinky milk, and the people that have to replace the carpets. What we should do is fine these extremists for the cost of replacing the carpets, and we should lock them up for criminal damage.
I totally agree. Nothing more than thugs.
Could you imagine if they were maybe of a different race? It's all very well when Tarquin and so if you look all sort of nice and twee, you can do this. But if you were of a different race, wearing maybe a balaclava but doing exactly the same thing, you'd probably be in a lot more trouble.
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting they go to Fortnum & Masons, isn't it?
Yes, I was going to say, if it's Fortnum & Masons,
they should go to the co-op or something
really
like that,
are disgusting.
It's a disgrace. Right, well, that's that. What are your thoughts on that? But let's move on to the quickfire quiz. This is the part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other stories hitting the headlines right now. Please play along at home and please keep tally of the score so none of them try and cheat. I'm joined now by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also GB News presenter Father Calvin Robinson. Let's hear your buzzer. Lizzie, you go first. Very nice. And Calvin? Very good. OK, right.
I like Calvin.
Now, remember, don't press the buzzer before I finish the end of the question, otherwise you'll be disqualified from this. All right. You at home, same thing. Right, let's begin. First question. Question number 1. Vladimir Putin turned 70 yesterday, but what gift was he given by the leader of Belarus? Was it A, a puppy, B, a tractor, or C, a decorated vase? Calvin.
The Ukraine. I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Oh, very funny.
No, he wasn't given that. He's not going to get that.
A puppy.
A puppy. Lizzie?
I'm going to go for the vase.
The vase. My goodness, I love this. I know the answer. They're both wrong. It's a tractor.
No.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a tractor. I think it's the only present he got, by the way. Yes, the Belarusian president and ally Alexander Lukashenko presented Putin with a gift certificate for a tractor in St. Petersburg. Tractors have been the pride of the Belarusian industry since Soviet times. So, panel, what do you think of that? Would you give a world leader a birthday present?
Certainly not him, that's for sure. A tractor? Weird, isn't it? I wouldn't be really that thankful if I got a tractor for a present.
What do you get a world leader, though? It's a difficult
Especially
one,
if you're Vladimir Putin and you're...
Picture of himself.
Just a mirror. Give him a mirror. To look in a mirror, mate. Right, here's question 2. So, 0-0. Here's question 2. Which city has been announced as the host of Eurovision 23? Is it A, Glasgow, B, Manchester, or C, Liverpool? Lizzie Cundy.
Liverpool.
It's Liverpool.
Yes,
right.
indeed.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
Yeah,
I can't wait. Ryland's doing it.
Yes.
Dear mate.
The city was in the running alongside Glasgow to host a colourful contest on behalf of last year's winners, Ukraine. Remember how quickly Nicola Sturgeon was to get in and become part of the United Kingdom at that point, off of Glasgow. The organisers have said that Liverpool will be covered in sequins and glitter to deliver a Eurovision with a message of peace. Let's see what my panel think of that. Are you big on Eurovision, Lizzie?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah?
I love it. We do a lucky dip of only we pick out who's going to win, and I always end up winning, weirdly.
That's good, isn't it?
I love it. We all dress up.
Oh.
You'll dress up.
Come, Calvin, you'll enjoy
Cup of tea.
You could put sequins in your hair. That would look
overly
great.
camp and cheesy, and it's never good music. I don't get it.
Oh, no, we like the theatre of it and the drama. And it all gets political.
Why is the music so bad? That's the only thing. Right, question 3. Whoever has the closest answer wins the point. There's a new government-backed proposal for drilling companies to offer residents cash incentives to approve fracking in their area. But how much money will the companies offer? Please press your buzzer. Don't just answer. Calvin.
25%.
25%?
30.
30%. No, 30% of what? It's £1,000. You're both...
£1,000?
You don't listen to what you've been... The plans to offer cash in exchange for local consent come after Liz Truss overturned the moratorium on fracking last month as part of her push for the UK to become more energy independent. So that's just one point here. How much would you take for fracking, Lizzie? How much would you need?
Oh, anything, babe. I'll get fracking. Get fracking.
Steady.
No, I didn't say anything.
No, daytime.
What do you think?
I understood they were going to give people 25% off their energy bills if they allowed fracking in the area. That's why I said 25%.
No, right, OK. Right, question 4. The most popular baby names for the past year were announced this week. Which boy's name got the top spot? Was it A?
I think I've...
Was it A, Noah, B, George, or C, Oliver? Yes, Calvin.
Noah, a good biblical name.
Noah, what do you think?
I'm going to go for George because it's the royals and it's popular.
And the answer is Noah.
Oh, well done.
Calvin. Very good.
Noah's Ark.
Yes, Oliver was previously the most popular name, but now it's Noah. And then on the list is Lilibet as well, funnily enough.
Did you know that this was my nickname at school, Lilibet?
Oh, that's lovely.
Yes, Meghan Markle took it off me.
I won't tell you what mine was. Right. Well, was that it? I thought there was one more.
Mohammed's going to be number 5, and we're discussing that on the show tomorrow.
Is
it's
it?
quite controversial.
Is it? Well, let's see. So what's the scores on the doors? Let's see. So what do you think? Noah? It's a nice name, isn't it?
Noah's a lovely name.
Yeah, I think Noah in the Ark and things like that. Yeah, that's a nice little name. Apparently it was 1-1. 1-1. So it's a draw.
Tie.
Yeah, I'm surprised at that.
I like to win.
I'm surprised that they got anything.
I'm surprised.
Right, well, on today's show, I've been asking, are we turning into a nanny state? And according to our Twitter poll, not much changed on that one. 90% of you said yes, and 10% of you said no. I've got to say a big thank you to my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, thank you very much. And GB News presenter Calvin Robertson for joining me today. And thank you to you at home for your company. I'll be back tomorrow to discuss the top stories with former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and also Spiked Deputy Editor Fraser Myers. But now I'll leave you with the weather. Thank you for your company. Enjoy.
So looking ahead to this evening's weather then, and the UK looking mostly fine with clear, sunny spells. A few showers though in the northwest. Let's home in. It's going to be a dry start to the evening across the southwest of England. Fairly clear skies and no more than a gentle wind blowing. Then high pressure will be in charge of the weather across the southeast, keeping it dry and settled with long, clear periods developing. Some patchy cloud drifting in across Wales, but the weather's staying fine there, and some also clear spells at times. And a similar weather setup expected as we head across to the Midlands, and the day ending on a quiet note with a good deal of dry and at times reasonably clear weather all round. Away from the North Pennines, where we could see some cloud, the northeast of England heading into the evening on a fine note as well. A slight southwesterly breeze is expected though. And that breeze fairly noticeable as we head north towards Scotland, although there will be clear spells in the east. Further west, more in the way of cloud, and showers expected there as well. Northern Ireland could catch a shower or two as well, but mainly towards the north and the west of the province and elsewhere. Although it will be a little breezy, the weather does look fine. So turning chilly across southern and eastern areas overnight under broken cloud. Meanwhile, winds strengthening in the northwest with rain arriving. And that's how the weather's shaping up this Sunday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
and me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
and from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Liam Halligan, standing in for Neil Oliver, who sends you all his greetings from Bonnie, Scotland. Tonight we're looking back on a tumultuous week of economics and politics. The pound went on a roller coaster ride as the Tory faithful gathered for their annual party conference in Birmingham, the first with Liz Truss as Prime Minister. The government then U-turned, scrapping its plans to cut the top rate of tax from 45 to 40 pence. For the top 2% of earners amidst a political backlash. Hardly surprising during a cost of living crisis. I'll be joined this next hour by financial analyst extraordinaire Justin Urquhart-Stewart, GB News' very own answer to Gordon Gekko, and also Victoria Scholar of Interactive Investor, grown-up discussions with bags of personality. All that and more coming up after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Liam. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. 10 people have died, including a primary school girl, in an explosion at a service station in County Donegal in Ireland. 4 men, 3 women and 2 teenagers have also died. It's understood the petrol station was the hub of the tight-knit village of Creesler. Northern Ireland's Fire and Rescue Service crossed the border to assist with the search and rescue efforts. Emergency services are still helping with the recovery mission, having already worked through the night. Irish police believe the blast was an accident, but aren't ruling out other causes.
At this point in time, we have to keep an open mind as a police service and how we investigate this. But our information at this point in time is pointing towards a tragic accident. That said, being a Garda, I have to take a holistic and overall viewpoint, but that's where we're going at the moment.
Member of the House of Lords and former Deputy Leader of the DUP, Lord Nigel Dodds, has called the incident horrendous.
One of us can relate to calling into a filling station or wanting to call in and get some groceries or a snack or something, and to be caught up in something like this is just horrendous. And when you hear those who've died include men, women, teenagers, a young child, it really is awful. Our hearts and prayers are with the bereaved of those who have lost their lives, and obviously hope and pray that those that have been injured make a swift recovery.
In other news, the serial killer Peter Tobin has died after becoming unwell in prison. He was taken to hospital from HMP Edinburgh, where he was serving 3 life sentences for the rape and murder of Polish student Angelika Kluk and the murders of teenagers Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol in 1991. Their bodies were found buried in the garden of his former home in Margate in Kent 17 years later. Police questioned Tobin about other murders they believe he may have committed, but he refused to give any details. The UK has exported lamb to the United States for the first time since 1989. The Prime Minister has hailed the move a milestone after President Joe Biden lifted the decades-old ban on British meat imports in September last year. The market is worth an estimated £37 million in the first 5 years of trade. Celebrating the news on Twitter, Liz Truss said the move marks a well-deserved boost to our rural economy. Only around 1 in 5 trains are running today across Scotland, England and Wales. Members of the RMT union are staging their 8th strike this year in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. The train operator's chief negotiator, Tim Shoveler, says passengers should only travel by train if absolutely necessary. RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch has warned of further strikes to come. A large explosion has seriously damaged the only road and rail bridge linking the occupied Crimean Peninsula to Russia. Russian authorities say 3 people have died in the blast on the Kerch Bridge, but it's not yet clear if it was a deliberate attack. Ukraine haven't claimed responsibility. The bridge, which is the longest in Europe, is crucial to supplying the peninsula and Russian forces across Ukraine. Moscow says the train line is now reopened and large queues of cars and buses have started crossing again. And thousands of people have formed a human chain around Parliament calling for the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Mr. Assange is currently being held in London's Belmarsh prison amid a legal battle to avoid extradition to the US, where he could face a prison sentence of up to 175 years. He's wanted in America over the leak of secret military information. Former PR advisor Richard Hillgrove says it's important for journalism that Assange is freed.
The fact that this is being led not so much from Don't Extradite Assange again, but the National Union of Journalists and the International Federation of Journalists, which has 600,000 members globally, leading this exercise means, the penny is dropping that this is not, this is political. This puts journalism in the firing line. If Assange goes down, journalism goes down.
TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Liam Halligan.
Liz Truss was in Birmingham this week for her first conference as Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister. She put on a brave face. My priorities are growth, growth and growth, Truss declared, channeling perhaps Tony Blair's education, education, education speech in 1997, his first as a Labour Prime Minister. The opponents of growth, the vested interests, the forces of decline are wrong, 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 Truss told the party faithful in a definite throwback to another Prime Minister's words. For it was in 1990, responding to Brussels' attempts further to dilute UK sovereignty, that Margaret Thatcher insisted no, no, no from the House of Commons dispatch box, as every true blue Conservative knows. Rather than the Iron Lady, though, Truss has come across as politically tin-eared after she and Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng tried to lower the top 45% rate of additional income tax to 40%, a tax cut for the top 2% of earners only, those on more than £150 a year in the midst of an escalating cost of living crisis. Truss and Kwarteng were forced into a U-turn during their own conference, scrapping that move to a 40% top rate after Tory tax cuts were blamed for serious jitters on currency and debt markets, with the pound tumbling and government borrowing costs sharply up, a trend that rippled out across the economy, causing mortgage and pension panic. This new Prime Minister and her senior team, they're now desperate to make amends, to assert themselves and their pro-growth supply-side agenda on their party and the broader country, cutting back regulation and taxes in a bid to get the British economy moving. The reality is, though, that the trajectory of the economy, and with it not just the government's survival, but the prosperity of thousands of firms and millions of households across the UK, now depends largely on market and broader financial forces, which are way beyond any politician's control. Cast your mind back, if you're old enough, to the 2008 global financial crisis, a time when the entire world economy was upended due to the reckless activities of out-of-control investment banks, not least in the UK and US. Financiers in the city, on Wall Street and elsewhere, they borrowed billions to place huge bets on increasingly dubious investments, so complex almost no one understood them, knowing that governments, taxpayers would be forced to bail them out to avoid a full-scale banking collapse, with all the disastrous economic and political turmoil, to say nothing of the civic unrest that would cause. Such investment banks, having grown to a gargantuan size as regulators turned a blind eye, were too big to fail, don't you know? The sharp-suited bosses running them specialised in heads I win, tails you lose activity, the kind that gives capitalism a bad name. At the end of 2008 and into 2009, the financial crisis was so serious that merely cutting interest rates to reboot the global economy was deemed insufficient. The Bank of England, along with the Federal Reserve and other leading central banks, they launched a one-off programme called quantitative easing, or QE, creating money out of nothing, then injecting it into the financial system to avoid a disastrous banking collapse. But the UK's initial £50 billion QE rescue scheme, meant to last just a few months, it grew like Topsy. Central bank largesse, it juiced up share prices. It was used to buy government bonds, meaning the state could borrow more cheaply. Investment banks and successive governments, a powerful combination, they became addicted as QE morphed into the economic equivalent of crack cocaine. The emergency measures, meant to be temporary from 2009, morphing into a lifestyle choice. By early 2020, the UK's QE programme had ballooned from 50 billion of money creation to 425 billion, 8 times the original plan. By pushing up share prices and shielding ministers from really tough spending decisions, QE has friends in high places. Perhaps that's why it's come under so little scrutiny, barely debated in Parliament, with almost the entire media taking it completely for granted. Yet by boosting stock and property prices, QE's made the asset-rich richer still, and housing even less affordable for countless ordinary families. And those related ultra-low interest rates, they've meanwhile punished tens of millions of savers. The reality is, though, that QE is deeply counterproductive. Hosing economies down with liquidity doesn't make them grow faster. That's a bit like trying to get fat by buying a bigger belt. QE's also skewed bank lending towards incumbent zombie companies, starving smaller dynamic firms of finance, the kind that really boosts growth. And many real-world investors, meanwhile, those growing businesses, rather than engaged in financial engineering, they've been so spooked by the monetary madness of recent years, they've kept serious money off the table, stymieing growth even more. And on top of all that, the more QE's been used to pump up financial markets, making shares and other assets artificially expensive, the harder it's become to stop the mass money printing without sparking another meltdown, with all the related economic and political carnage. And that's the huge danger, that years of grotesquely excessive QE have set us up for collapse. But if QE was excessive before COVID, it went into overdrive during the pandemic, for it was QE that largely paid for lockdown. As the government struggled to fund furlough and business support loans, the state issued IOUs like confetti, many bought up by the Bank of England. Our money printing programme duly expanded by another £450 billion to an astonishing £875 billion in total. That's 6 times the annual NHS budget created out of thin air, with more QE happening during the year and a half of lockdown than during the whole of the previous decade. And now, as inflation has finally punched through, this QE-driven stock market, bond market, Ponzi scheme, it's starting to look quite shaky. Across the world, interest rates are rising, and that will continue as we retreat from the ultra-low levels which have prevailed since 2008. No politician, no central banker either can stop that happening. This is an inconvenient truth which no one wants to admit, certainly not the likes of the International Monetary Fund and the central bankers who oversaw QE. Better to blame the UK's recent financial turmoil on an incoming government, one led by a politically vulnerable Prime Minister with only lukewarm support from her own MPs. Now, don't get me wrong here. There was much to criticise in the government's mini-budget. To lower the top tax rates with a tough winter looming, with millions worrying how to make ends meet, was spectacularly bad timing. But the idea this unfunded tax cut crashed the pound is absurd. Lowering the top rate cost the state around £2 billion, a rounding error amongst almost £900 billion of government revenue. Lowering the top rate could even make the state money, given the impact on work incentives. That, though, is now the accepted political narrative that a greed-driven Tory government drove down sterling while causing borrowing costs to spike, the higher borrowing costs rippling across the economy, damaging hard-working families and firms. And it's a narrative this Truss government will struggle to shake off, all because of a lack of political nous. But the broader truth is this. Our financiers and central bankers in cahoots with placid governments has created an almighty financial bubble, supported by mass money printing and ultra-low interest rates. And as we finally retreat from that, and the QE bubble-blowing machine is turned off, borrowing costs inevitably will rise as the cheap credit era comes to an end. This is not an easy message, but it's one we can hardly avoid. We are in for a period of painful adjustment, a truth our political and media class must urgently start to explain. So what do you think? How are rising interest rates impacting you and your family? And who do you blame for rates going up? The government, greedy investors, or are these rises inevitable as we retreat from years of ultra-low interest rates? Email me here at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GBNews. We'll read out some of your comments later in the show. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, you are an extremely experienced person when it comes to financial markets, as are you, Victoria Scholar. We've both had chats on GB News many, many times. Thank you so much for coming in early Saturday evening to join me here as we attempt, all of us in our way, to cover for the fantastic Neil Oliver. Justin, you and I have talked about QE a lot over the years. To what extent do you think what we're really seeing here is the end of an era rather than a response to a single mini-budget statement?
Well, it certainly feels like one, and probably deserves to be one. Because as you perfectly explained in that wonderful review of everything, QE was brought in to solve a particular issue, an emergency. And from that, and I remember when we finished that first 50 billion, turning around to some of the people saying, well, presumably we couldn't do that again, could we? Oh, no, we can't do that again, absolutely impossible. And yes, there you described, it went on
we
again.
We do it 8 times more.
Absolutely. And it became, we were addicted to this thing. And to the next generation coming through, particularly of those in the finance and politics of finance, actually say, well, it's magic money, it's fine, it works. Nothing's gone wrong with it, we'll carry on doing it. And no one thought about the end game, and those who sat there and thought about, eventually, this has to be paid for. And, of course, also, interest rates are low. No, as you said, they're ultra low. They've got to get back to real rates. And you talk to people now about actually getting back to real rates, they start sucking through their teeth and say, I can't afford that, because they've been used to this amount of rates pushed so low down. So this is a change.
Victoria Scholar, you're not here to talk about politics. You are very much into finance. You look at spreadsheets and yield curves and all the rest of it. but I know you do have a good sense of history from our previous discussions. Just put in historic context, Victoria, the last couple of weeks. It's been pretty financially turbulent, hasn't it? And it has followed that mini budget statement on the 23rd of September.
Yeah, and I do think that the mini budget statement does have something to do with it, given the sharp movement that we saw in the pound, which hit a record low on the Monday after the Friday when the announcement came out. And we also saw that dysfunction in the gilt market, which forced the Bank of England...
The market for government debt.
Government debt market,
Yeah.
exactly, that forced the Bank of England to step in with that emergency intervention to save some of the biggest pension funds, which were understood to be on the brink of collapse. But to put it into a broader picture, like you say, this is a shift away from ultra-low interest rates. And that's been the case since essentially the end of last year, when we got the revival of inflation post-pandemic. And the reason why they've been able to keep interest rates that low for that long is because we haven't been forced with a picture in which we're dealing with inflation. But now, post-COVID, it's reared its ugly head, and interest rates have no choice but to go up to try and curtail price levels and bring inflation, which is now almost at double digits, back down to the Bank of England's target, which is just 2%.
Of course, inflation, Justin, this is all about the cost of living. Inflation, as Victoria said, it's currently 9.9%. It's come down a little bit, but it's still very, very high. Bank of England's target is 2%. Crikey. To what extent do you think, though, that mini budget statement, just to slightly push back against Victoria at my peril, it was the spark, it was the catalyst rather than the cause of these big movements? I'm not here to, stand up for the Tories or Kwasi Kwarteng. I'm coming at this as a sort of economist, as an analyst, trying to explain to people at home who are worried about rising interest rates, worried about paying their bills, where this is actually coming from.
Yeah, the 45p rate cancellation was irrelevant. It makes for a headline. Tories get embarrassed because they've had to rein back on it.
Pretty inept, though, politically, the timing, right?
And it is that, and it's almost looking back at politicians trying to play. No, I'm Margaret Thatcher and I'm big and butch.
I've got the train set now. I'm going to lower the train. They're only lowering it to it was 40% under Blair, and the whole of Blair and most of Brown's government, the top rate of tax was 40% under Labour. So it's hardly a sort of extreme policy.
No, and also this idea that I've got to be big and determined and I've no turning. Well, hang on a second. Mrs. Thatcher did turn several times, because sometimes you actually realise, whoa, I'm going to wait here. I can't take on the miners now because I don't have enough coal. I've actually worked out that actually I'm going to...
Showing his age.
All this, well, it goes back that far, making sure that the days of monetary policy needed to be changed round as well. She had to reverse on that one. But she's known for actually saying no, no, no. Well, she adjusted and changed. In the last few years, she forgot how to change, and actually that was probably her fall, dealing with the taxes then. But nonetheless, there's somehow the feeling that you have to be big and butch, and if I do be dynamic and I'm decisive, that actually all make it well. Markets don't work like that.
Our former Lib Dem Prime Minister perhaps a bit too keen to demonstrate her Thatcherite credentials.
Absolutely.
Has that cost us?
Yes, it has cost us. And there's one thing as well. Was one thing and maybe this is why you didn't call it. They didn't call it a budget. You do not, if you've got a financial statement, go and actually talk to all the banks and fund managers and things like that the night before. You're supposed to be in purdah. You keep quiet. And you talk to those people, including some of the short sellers, who have actually, Kwasi Kwarteng used to work, one of them.
He did.
And then, lo and behold, the following day, there are short sales done almost immediately. And you think, well, stone me.